Welcome to the Newtown Big Dreams podcast, an interview-style talk show that's your gateway to the fabulous and fascinating people who relocated to start a new life. Whether you're new to our podcast or your city, our fellow neighbors from across Canada, North America, and the entire English-speaking world share their stories of reaching new horizons and big dreams. So sit back and relax as we navigate in-depth and intimate conversations with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, executives, creatives, and anyone who can share their story about their Newtown big dreams. And now, here's your host, Luke J. Menkes.
So, Efi, thank you for meeting me here on a Sunday. It's
my pleasure.
It's a little chilly, but it's much better than it was.
Oh,
we're finally seeing some spring.
Spring is here. I mean, a little chilly in the winery to keep the temperature for the wine, but outside it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Sun is shining. Life is good.
Right. So I'm with Efi Perel.
Perel. Yeah.
Efi Perel inside the Tender Hope Winery.
Right.
And it's not even open yet, but I'm lucky enough to be inside here.
Right. It's not open to the public yet.
Yeah.
We're licensed by the government and everything. But we hope to be open end of May, beginning of June, and have a tasting area where people can come and taste the wines and buy the wines. And
Beautiful. Well, I want to talk to you today about this location and also your experience moving here in 2015, and you're Israeli by background.
Okay, so I was born in Israel. I have dual citizenship, Israeli and Canadian. My father is from Ottawa.
Okay.
He was born in Ottawa. He immigrated to Israel when he was 24.
Was it work-related?
No.
Or do you have some family?
No, because we're Jewish, so he felt that he wants to come and build the Jewish homeland, and he was very idealistic, so he just immigrated to Israel. So I was born in Jerusalem, and spent most of my first 30 years in Israel, with an exception of 2 years in Spain, in Europe.
Right.
And then I studied the East Asian Studies and got a scholarship to Taiwan.
Wow.
So
they speak Chinese.
Chinese, right.
So did you learn Chinese?
Yeah, that's what I learned also in the university, the language and the culture and everything. And I went there, met my wife there, got married, had some kids, and I lived there for 14 years.
In Taiwan? In
Taiwan, yeah.
So you must be fluent in 3 languages, I'm guessing. English, Hebrew, and Chinese.
And Chinese. I speak a little bit of Spanish also.
What do you think is the hardest to learn out of those 3? I understand they're all very difficult.
They're all very difficult. The problem is for Western people, because Chinese is a tonal language, means the same sound in a different tone means something else. The concept is very hard for us because we didn't grow up with it. So I would say probably Chinese because of the tones, and of course the writing. It's completely different. It's not phonetic, right? It's a sign language. You have to learn the signs. So you have to learn let's say to read newspaper, you have to know about 3,000 different signs. So
amazing.
Yeah.
And Hebrew. So children learn Hebrew and English in Israel?
Everything's in Hebrew. You learn English as a second language in school, maybe 2 hours a week or something like that.
Almost everybody speaks English. Is that true? No.
Not almost everybody. Many people do speak English because it's a Western country. It's geared towards the West, and American culture is the dominant culture in the world now.
Right.
So, and also a lot of people came from many other countries to Israel. Right. Israel is only 70 years old, although it's really more than 3,000 years old.
Right.
The Jews were in exile for more than 2,000 years. But, I mean, I will never say that Hebrew is hard for me because the language you grew up with is natural for you.
Right.
But some people do complain that Hebrew is not an easy language. I mean, everybody says Spanish is an easy language or something like that, or maybe Italian, but...
Right.
Yeah.
So Is your father still in Israel?
Yeah. All of my siblings are in Israel.
So that was his dream, to move there and help build the country.
Right.
And tell us a little bit about your experience growing up there. I've never visited, always wanted to. Hope I do someday soon. Is it, people talk about terrorism and strife. There
is terror, and it's always, when you grow up in Israel, it's always in your back mind, in the back of your mind, sorry. But, life is normal. You get up, you go to work, everything. Very rarely you encounter terrorism, right? It's like when you grow up in Los Angeles and then you hear the shootings, the murders all the time. Most people don't encounter it, don't see it, but it's there, it happens. But people are aware of this, like in a bus, all of a sudden there'll be like a loud boom, everybody will go to the ground.
Yeah.
And here, people will just turn their head and look.
Right.
But you're conditioned to react differently. But life just goes on. There are some times that are more tense and more things happen. But a lot of people don't encounter this. Like maybe they'll never encounter anything in their lives, but they will know somebody who did, or somebody in his family. So it's every time when you hear something in the news about a country or something, it sounds awful and how can people live there or anything like that. But when you really go and live there, you see that it's just normal life like any other country.
Right.
It's not Kelowna. Kelowna is so peaceful and nothing almost never happens here. But even here, we had some murders.
There's problems everywhere. Yeah, is it culturally pretty similar to the West in Israel? Yeah.
It's a very Western country. Yeah. It's a secular country, and I think maybe only 30% of the population is religious or something like that. Most people are secular. It's very
similar to here.
Yeah, very advanced and modern. It's like an American or European country, but it's located in the Middle East. So,
right. Yeah. Did you grow up in Jerusalem?
Yeah, mostly.
And what's the difference between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv? Those are the two largest cities. Is that right?
Yeah. So Tel Aviv is a city on the sea, which means that it's more open usually, and there's a lot of nightlife. They call it the city that never sleeps. You want to go to bars, pub, discos, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock at night, you'll find something. And Jerusalem is in the mountains, so the weather is much cooler. It's more traditional. There are many more religious people who live in Jerusalem because of the history and the significance to many different religions. And so Tel Aviv is the open party city, and Jerusalem is more conservative and
right, but a little more quiet.
Yeah, quiet.
Yeah. Interesting. So how did you get into the wine business?
So it's interesting because I always drank wine a little bit, at home. And there's a big difference between the North American countries, where here wine is illegal, alcohol is illegal. You can't drink before you're 18, and your parents won't let you drink usually.
Right.
While in Europe or other countries, wine is just part of a meal.
Right.
It's food, so you won't let your kid get drunk, but you'll give him a tiny sip, even when he's like 5, 6, 7, just tiny sip. I don't know, maybe it's the weekend dinner and all the family sits and just give him a tiny sip or something like that. So, so people grow up with it, and it's no big deal.
Right.
So when I grew up, especially my background is a bit more traditional religious. So on the weekends, there's wine, ceremony like wine with a meal. So I always drank a little bit in 1-2 sips when even from childhood.
Right.
And it was normal, but wasn't in love in wine yet. Then in my early 20s, I lived in Spain for 2 years and got introduced to Spanish wine. And it was really it was so cheap. I mean, you went to the supermarket, wine was cheaper in there than bottled water. Yeah. Right. So started just experimenting and testing and tasting and everything. And really started to fall in love with all the nuances and the different varieties and different ways. So when I came back to Israel, I went to work in a vineyard.
Okay.
In a wine grape vineyard, which was a pretty big vineyard, talking about 700 acres.
What is a typical vineyard here in the Okanagan as far as that?
So here it's really, really different because I also our winery does grapes from the Okanagan and from the Columbia Valley over the border, which geographically it's the same geographical unit, which was caused by a movement of glaciers. But here it's just the northern tip of the Columbia Valley. So it has a different name and there's a border, but the fact that a few people decided we draw a line and this is the border doesn't make it a different geographical
right. So the soil conditions, the climate, very
of course, what we said the macroclimate is different between many areas. Even here, like in the Okanagan Valley, like in Kelowna, usually people will grow different varieties than in Oliver or Soyuz, right? Here we are more northern, so it's more, I would say, good for Riesling, Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, right? You'll get more higher acidity, and if you grow the same thing in Osoyoos, which is probably only 80, 90 kilometers away, people grow more reds, and you'll get, even if you grow the same whites, you'll get more tropical fruit and more full-body wines. Yeah. But we are all here a desert, really. Here we have more rain than, like my furthest vineyard is 700 kilometers from here.
Okay.
So
that's Washington or Oregon?
It's Washington on the border with Oregon, the Walla Walla Valley.
Okay.
So I have vineyards from Walla Walla to East Kelowna. Yeah. Right? But there they'll have the same, very little rain, very cool winters, snow and everything, and it's the same geographical unit. There they'll have less rain. The vegetation is a little bit more like a desert than here, but still, I mean, we grow apples here, they grow apples there, they grow cherries, we grow cherries. It's really the same unit. So we were talking about Israel. The vineyard,
right.
So here in the Okanagan, because the land is so expensive, most farms are 10 acres.
10 acres is a typical size. And there, you were on a 700 acre.
In Israel, it was 700 acres, but there it was a part of a collective. Okay. Yeah, so not all vineyards are that large. But for example, in Washington, you'll see a vineyard that is 100 acres, another vineyard is 500 acres. There'll be a vineyard with maybe 20, 30 acres. But here, almost all the vineyards are 10 acres, right? Yeah. Some of the big wineries, they had the purchase power to purchase a lot of land, and they have bigger plots of land. But a typical grower here has a small farm. He has 10 acres, maybe 20 acres. If, over the time he bought the neighbor's land or something like that. So land here is so expensive that that's the reason that the plots are much smaller.
How did the grapes differ from Israel to the Okanagan?
So really, the varieties that I grew there are the same as we had. That vineyard that I worked was Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Sauvignon Blanc, and what else we had there? Malbec. So the same varieties, but the climate differs a lot, right? It's a much hotter climate. The winters, if it's 12 degrees, people think it's cold.
Right.
So
like California or Spain?
Yeah, I would say it's more like Spain. Yeah. Or California or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So interesting. So you started to really enjoy wine in your 20s in Spain, and then you worked for a vineyard.
Right. I worked
in Israel.
For about 3 years, and I also made some wine there. This vineyard was growing for the biggest winery in Israel, called the Carmel Mizrahi, which here it will be considered a big winery, but if in the States or other places in the world, I made wine and everything. But then after I went to university and I got the scholarship, so I got sidetracked from that.
I see. And, what were you always interested in East Asian studies?
Yeah, I think it came from when I was a child. I read a lot of books about the East, like Shogun and different that. It really captured my mind. I was reading a lot of books about the East and also science fiction, and so it attracted something.
Did you ever read Taipan? I think that was the same author.
Yeah, same author. Yeah,
I read that. It's about Hong Kong.
Exactly right.
I read that. Book.
So Shogun happens in Japan, and Taipan happens in Hong Kong.
Yeah,
and it's all about when the British came, and So very, very, I read a lot as a child. I would read maybe 5 books a week. So it's not like now when you have TV and people even are not looking at TV. It's only computers and everything.
Yeah, true. So what's the wine industry like in Taiwan?
In Taiwan, there's almost no wine industry.
So they import.
Yeah, because of the weather, it's an island, so it's very humid.
Okay.
So grapes don't do well in a humid environment. They get a lot of diseases, a lot of funguses, molds. So
do people drink? Do they drink wine?
Yeah, people do drink wine. Wine is not part of Chinese culture. They have rice wine, right? Okay. So they do drink that, but because Taiwan is also a country that was open to the West, especially to American influence since just after the Second World War, not like China. So it's a much more modern and a Western country, I would say, than China.
Yeah, my understanding is after the war, the Chinese Civil War, Taiwan was the territory that the losing side ended up with.
Exactly. So Chiang Kai-shek was the president of China. He lost.
Right.
He took 1 million soldiers with him and got on boats, and they just landed in Taiwan, and they reestablished what he called the Chinese government in exile.
Interesting. Yeah, I've been to Hong Kong, but never to Taiwan.
Right.
Is it worth a visit?
It's a very beautiful country. I mean, it's an island. It's tropical. The south part is more tropical, but a lot of vegetation and everything. And people are open and nice and very modern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you go from there to getting back into the wine?
Okay, so I got married, and mostly I worked in sales.
In Taiwan?
For Taiwanese companies as an international sales to other countries.
Okay.
Not within even though I speak Chinese, I'm not a native speaker, so it's not as easy, right?
Yeah.
And so, but you can always find work selling what they produce there to other countries. But didn't like to sitting in the office for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. I had to do it. You have to provide for your family and everything. But at some point, I just said, okay, it's enough. I was reading a lot of books about winemaking, and I had a group of friends there that were really into wine and tasting wines from many other countries. We should probably taste the wine before it oxidizes.
So we've got some wine here now. You take grapes from around the province in Oregon and Washington State.
Right.
And then you produce them.
Right. So we have vineyards, like I said, from Walla Walla in the south to East Kelowna is our most northern vineyard here. And this is a Merlot from Osoyos. And Merlot is a grape that does very well in the Okanagan. I would say it's probably the grape that does the best of the Bordeaux varieties. It's very fruity and smooth here. So, enjoy.
Okay. That's delicious. So you don't grow any of your own grapes. You select them.
So there are two different kinds of wineries here in BC. Licenses. A land-based winery, which means that the winery is tied to the land, which is on. You have to have a vineyard, at least 2 acres.
Right.
And a commercial winery.
Right.
So as me and my partner, we are still young entrepreneurs. I'm not so young, but Canada is a great country to live in. But if you want to start a business, you have to have a lot of money.
Yeah, it's true.
So, I mean, in some countries, you have maybe $10,000. You can start something really, really small. So in Canada, if you don't have $200-$300, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Now, the wine business here is much more expensive because if you want to buy land and be a land-based winery and then build a building and everything, you're talking of a minimum investment and the equipment and everything of $3 million.
Right.
For me, it's impossible.
Right.
So the only other route I think for young entrepreneurs to go is to be a commercial winery, which means you don't have to have your own vineyards. You work with growers. You select the best vineyards for your taste, right? And then you can rent a commercial space and have your winery there.
Right.
So this is a rented space that we had to buy the equipment and the barrels and everything, of course, but we didn't have to make a few $1 million investment to purchase land and everything.
Right.
So
what do you get from the growers? Do you get grapes? Do you get the juice? Like, how does it get shipped to you?
No. So first of all, I was a grower for many years, so I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly what I want.
Right.
Many
maybe tell us, like, do you travel and you visit these growers?
Sure.
And then you make a decision.
Right. So what I do is I work with growers that are really, really great growers here in the Okanagan and also in Washington. They're very professional and they have special sites. Because my philosophy is, in the winery, I try to do the least possible. It's all about the grapes. It's, if you want to make a great meal and you don't have great ingredients, so then it'll be very hard to make a great meal. But if you have great ingredients, even if you're an average cook, you can still make something nice.
Yes.
So for me, the fruit, that's what we call the grapes here. Like in the industry, if I said the fruit. Yeah. The fruit and the location of the vineyards are 85% of the wine that I'll have in the bottle. So it's the most important thing. So what I do, I have contracts with growers and I visit the vineyards every few weeks, and the growers grow to my specifications, like how many tons I want per acre. Of course, they have the expertise and they know their site. So we talk about the canopy, if you want a bigger canopy, a smaller canopy, it changes with the site, changes with the year. If it's a sunnier year, you'll get more growth, you'll get more sugar. If the year is much cooler, so then you have to adjust. The irrigation also has to adjust according to the weather and everything. Like in 2015, the first year I was here, I don't know if you remember, it was really, really hot year. I was working in the vineyards, it was like 40 degrees.
Yeah,
like
continuously.
Right. But then we had much cooler years, right? So everything has to change, but you just the vineyards are everything. So, I mean, many wineries here also, they don't have enough land. Even though they have their own estate vineyards, they also work with other growers because they don't have enough grapes on their own, right? And also in Washington State, the model is different. There are a lot of famous vineyards that are very big vineyards, and the wineries there work with many different vineyards, and they like it because then they can get different flavor profiles, and have different wines with different flavor profiles. While when you have only one vineyard, on one hand, it's yours, and you can control everything, and it's very special also. But on the other hand, you'll only have that flavor profile. But when you can get different grapes from different sites, then you can play with it.
Yeah. So how much work is left to be done by the time you get the product here?
All the work, right? Like any other winery. Yeah. The grower does growing. Yeah. We bring the bins there. He picks into the bins. I come with the truck. I pick up the bins. I come here.
Okay. So then, you got the grapes here.
Right, exactly.
You're processing everything here.
Right. Yeah. So all the process is done here in the winery. Of course, the process is a bit different between reds and whites. Reds, we usually crush them. We say we crush open the grape, but then we ferment on the skins. Right. And the white grapes we just press right away, and then we ferment the juice. So you don't get what we call skin contact. So the white will be a lighter wine, much smoother, with less tannins and higher acidity usually.
This is delicious. Does this have a brand name yet?
Okay, so the winery is called Tender Hope Winery.
How did you get that name?
So it's really a translation of my daughter's Chinese name.
Okay.
Because my daughter has a Chinese name and a Hebrew name, but it's a translation of my daughter's Chinese name from Chinese into English.
Okay.
So
Tender Hope.
Tender Hope.
Yeah.
So that's Tender Hope Winery, and all the wines will be under Tender Hope. This will probably be a part of a Bordeaux blend that I'm glad you like it. It's really very young. It's only 5 months old. So this will be aged, usually I age around 18 months for reds in barrels.
What happens between 5 months and 18 months?
So the wine gets rounder. It gains more complexity. Usually we also give it some new wood. This is from a neutral barrel, which doesn't have any wood taste. So you feel more the fruit, but the wood will give it like a frame. Okay. So it's a little bit of a backbone, a bit of a frame. And the tannins get rounder and the whole wine gets smoother and rounder. So this what happens, and gains some complexity. That what happens during the aging process. Right. So it also different. If you age, usually we age in barrels because then you get a tiny amount of oxygen into the wine, and this is what really rounds the tannins and ages the wine. If you'll keep the same wine in a stainless steel tank, the aging process is much, much, much slower because there's no oxygen getting into the tanks. So you'll get more fruitier and very fresh and sharp wine, but it won't be as round as if you age in barrels.
I see.
So that's the difference.
So have you started selling to the public yet?
We are probably going to start selling in a week or so. Nice. We're just registering our products with the LDB, the Liquor Distribution Bureau. And currently we have 2 wines. One is Syrah, and the other one is a white, Roussanne, which not many people do. It's a wine, the origin of the grapes are from the Rhone Valley in the south of France. So it's quite unique. But this May, we're going to bottle a lot of wines. So we're going to have a Chardonnay from here, from East Kelowna, and some Cabernet Sauvignon also, and a Sangiovese blend, and the Roussanne and Syrah, of course.
Right.
And a little bit later in the year, we're going to have a sparkling, also from West Kelowna.
Very nice.
And some Pinot Noir.
Very nice. So on this location, you're hoping to open a tasting room and a retail store?
Right.
And hopefully June 1st?
Yeah.
If everything goes well?
If everything goes well.
Do you have a lot of experience in the construction industry in British Columbia and Canada? It can take a lot longer.
Yeah.
I think it's the same everywhere in the world, but it can take longer.
Yeah. So we're not really going to do a lot of construction. The tasting and retail experience here will be that you really step into the winery. You don't step into a tasting room.
Right.
You'll step into the winery. You'll be tasting among the barrels and the tanks and everything. Direct winery experience, very rustic. And you will see how we make the wine, and you'll really get the feel of the place. Yeah. There'll be a few nice tables and nice tasting classes, and you taste the wine. But this is going to be the tasting experience here. Yeah.
So, that's great. Yeah. I love it so far. Okay. That's great. Who would you like to nominate? Come on the show.
I would like to nominate R.O.W Westbury, a winemaker and owner from Nagging Doubt Winery.
Okay.
Which was one of the wineries when I came to Kelowna. He gave me some work in the vineyard and in the winery, and taught me a lot also. He's a very nice guy and a very knowledgeable guy.
Great.
My father's originally from the East, so I had more connections there.
Yeah.
I first went there.
He's from Ottawa.
Ottawa, yeah. So I tried to get some work there. Couldn't find anything.
Wow.
And then I said, you know what? I was never been in BC before, so I just came here and said, okay, let's just explore and try to find work and everything. And I remember I first came to Penticton and was there in some motel, rented a car, and started driving in the Okanagan. I was like, almost fell down to the lake. It was so beautiful. It was like.
Amazing.
It's amazing. I think most people, we live here now. We just we drive. It's nice. We're used to it. But for somebody who has never been here and comes for the first time, it's it's so beautiful. The mountains and the lakes and the vegetation and the trees. It's mind-boggling. So I was like,
when was that? What year?
That was in early 2015. Really, in February. February 2015.
Yeah.
And I just was in love with the place. And then I got an opportunity to work in Summerhill Winery as a cellar hand. And also at the same time work for Nagging Doubt, which is a much smaller winery. I helped there. Was working 14 hours a day in the winery and then in the vineyard and everything. But it's once you come here and you see the beauty of the place, it just gets into your heart, and you don't want to go anywhere else.
So true. I had the same experience in 2008. Okay. I drove from Edmonton, and I just couldn't believe how beautiful it was. Right. It's amazing, and it was middle of winter too. But and I think you would probably recommend for a young entrepreneur that really loves something. Yeah, it's a good idea to work for someone who's experienced.
Sure.
Because you learn so much, right?
No doubt about it. I mean, I knew that I wasn't prepared to open a place on my own when I first came here, although it was always my dream.
Yeah.
I had vineyards experience, some winemaking experience, but wasn't enough. So my goal was to go and work for other people and really understand how the business side works and how the winemaking side to get more experience. And once I felt that I can, venture and go out on my own, then you take the next step. It's just, you don't jump into a pool if you can't swim, right?
That's right.
So,
yeah. That's great.
Right.
Well, thank you for the wine.
Thank you so much.
It was great to meet you and see your place before most people have even seen it. So,
great talking to you.
You too.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Newtown Big Dreams podcast. with your host, Luke Menkes, and his authentic guests. And we love our listeners and hope you subscribe now to learn more about the amazing journeys of our incredible guests who relocated to find a new town, big dreams. And remember, make your dreams big.